Hi, welcome back to Building on Bitcoin. I'm Andrew Hayward. I'm the culture editor at Decrypt, and today we're going to talk to some artists about ordinals and cultural assets on Bitcoin. We've got Joe Looney, Joe Cipollini, and Mark McKenzie here. Why don't you go down the line and introduce yourselves? Tell us about what you're working on.
All right, it looks like I'm first. I'm Joe Looney. I guess I'm known for Rare Pepe Wallet, and I'm a retired Rare Pepe scientist. So I've seen a lot in the NFT Bitcoin world. So that I think that's enough about me.
We want to hear a lot more about you, Joe. I'm Josie. I've been creating crypto art since 2017, and I have a project called Cyber Brokers out in the world that we launched last year.
I'm Mark. I'm one of the co-founders on Megapont, which is an NFT project that launched in 2021 on Stacks, which is layer 2 for Bitcoin.
Great. Thank you all for joining me today. So let's talk about ordinals. They've caught fire and fast, nearly 1.2 million inscriptions since late January. What has it been like to see the rise of, quote unquote, Bitcoin NFTs in this form? And what excites you about it? Whoever wants to jump in.
I'll jump in here. It's been really exciting to see, especially because obviously some of my first artworks 6 years ago were all about Bitcoin. And I remember when I started minting NFTs, obviously on Ethereum, I was trying to get some of my collectors that were, buying my prints and all of this to set up Ethereum addresses so I could send them the matching NFT of the Bitcoin print that they bought. And they were like, I don't touch Ethereum, not happening. And I couldn't even convince people to set up these wallets. And years later, they contacted me and said, sure, I'll take it, just because the NFTs eventually, became worth a lot and things like that. So it's exciting. There's a lot of question marks still, I think, out there that we'll see, especially just in regards to possible data pruning and what Bitcoin miners think. So I think it's exciting innovation that I'm excited to see people experimenting on. I think there are still some things to be figured out with it as well.
Yeah, I guess I could talk on the topic of Bitcoin NFTs. NFTs started on Bitcoin. I think that a lot of people don't realize that. It was the colored coins in 2012, and which were kind of what ordinals solved, I would say. And then in 2014, Counterparty came out, and then we started seeing collectibles in 2015. So even prior to Rare Pepes. So it's I think ordinals kind of they got the timing right. I think the bear market releasing something that's really, I would say, colored coins solved with just the way ordinals, the protocol works, not even counting inscriptions. So, and then kind of slapping inscriptions on top of that, and with the kind of meme of the data lives on chain forever, I think just kind of grabbed everyone's attention. So it's a really, I'd say, innovative way to do Bitcoin NFTs, but it's certainly not the only way or the first way.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think it's very easy to lean on the decentralization and the security of the Bitcoin network as a selling point. But first and foremost, ordinals were quite exciting at a time where we started to see more centralization come into other NFT paradigms on other protocols. The rise of sort of ever-evolving IPFS and centralized APIs to manage the metadata and the art itself. So Bitcoin and ordinals specifically were quite refreshing to see it just be, hey, this is your artwork on the chain. There's no metadata, there's no pointers, there's no smart contract scripting. It's just, look how cool this art is attached to a Satoshi that you can now move around, and we can track the provenance, the history, and the movement of that.
Yeah, a couple of you mentioned, everything being on chain, sort of a pushback to increasing centralization with NFTs on other chains. How important is that all compared to minting NFTs on Ethereum or Solana? What's going to get people to choose Bitcoin instead of those platforms? And what are the considerations there?
I'll jump in first on this. We launched a 10,000 collection, and 10,000 ordinal collection. And it's fundamentally very different to launching a collection on Solana or Ethereum or any other sort of smart contract-based blockchain. Couple of things. You don't have a smart contract to govern the mint and the distribution of tokens or artwork. So that in itself presents some unique challenges and is very, 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 very different. But one of the advantages of that is it truly feels like you're on ground zero and everybody has a chance to get involved with something. There's no concept of whitelists or managing who cannot and can mint. But it is challenging. We had our mint on Ethereum, ironically. So we wanted a smart contract to govern the mint so that we had some clear and I guess auditable way of ensuring that we weren't doing anything nefarious with our mint. So that is a technical solution that we need to solve, because there's a reason that this talk is called inscribing, not minting, because you're not minting. There's an inscription, there's art on a chain, and we haven't quite figured out the perfect distribution model yet for ordinals, I think it's fair to say. So I'm hoping that we start to see some experimentation, some innovation in that space to make it a little bit easier for artists moving forward this year.
Also, to your point of inscribing and having other chains not having that same capability just right off the bat, obviously that's huge. I've been minting NFTs on Ethereum for a while, and I've seen projects go down where the images are completely gone that weren't even stored on IPFS. So there's really no opportunity to bring those back. And then more recently, we've seen some really interesting and exciting ways for artists that have been updating the images and changing them, but also some scary ways with entire projects stripping the image that made their NFT worth anything and replacing it with literally a middle finger. So there's been some crazy things that have gone on with our project, Cyberbrokers. We know how scary that sort of landscape could be, and we stored some of the most robust art ever stored on Ethereum with like highly compressed custom binary formats actually stored into the smart contracts themselves, so that you don't have to render them from anywhere else or stored on IPFS. It's directly in the contract, but that's not the norm. That's not typical. It took us a tremendous time to be able to figure that out. It cost us 92 ETH to put everything on chain. We had to create the art in a specific way to serve that purpose. So this has definitely created like the baseline of that inscription that is really just important for the provenance and the value of anything that you're hoping to store there. I have some thoughts around whether that information will be there forever, but maybe we could save that to a later part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think the comparing like ordinals to like anything issued on like an EVM like a Solana or Ethereum is interesting. It kind of, I think the easiest way to look at that though from let's say a collector perspective or a potential artist perspective is who's in control of the rules, right? So with a EVM based system, whoever deploys a smart contract is the rule creator, right? But with ordinals, it's whoever, basically it's Casey right now, and then whoever else I guess submits PRs to ORD, which kind of governs like, you made an inscription, now what is it attached to? I mean, there's kind of ongoing discussions about these kind of phantom inscriptions that weren't inscribed the correct way. So now they're not on a Satoshi. But it really comes down to the rule set, right? So with, I'd say an important difference for anyone thinking about it is with ordinals, the rules are in the kind of software that everybody runs, that decentralized program ORD, whereas with anything on an EVM is whatever the smart contract says. And there's even attempts now to put the EVM onto inscriptions. That's what the BRC-20 is. And I actually talked to, I forget his name, but the developer that's working on that, and they have a way to put basically run Solidity contracts where the contracts are written as an inscription, and just using not even using the ordinal, and just using that data storage on Bitcoin that is assigned to a block. So you get ordering and storage right on Bitcoin. So yeah, it's different, a different set of challenges, but it's fun to kind of see this stuff take off and people build these second layer protocols. ORD is very similar to a counterparty, which is like what Rare Pepe's is built on. In that it's just this layer that sits on top of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin doesn't need to care about it. It can just exist and kind of ride along and get some of the security from the base chain.
Yeah, Joe, you mentioned counterparty. Ordinals really continues a rich history of cultural assets being on Bitcoin in a layer. Counterparty stacks after that. How does Ordinals sort of evolve and expand upon those concepts or those frameworks, and perhaps make it easier to understand or use?
Yeah, I think I love Ordinals. I think it's awesome how it's closer to Bitcoin than something like a counterparty, because the token itself is a Satoshi, right? So it is Bitcoin. Whereas on counterparty, when you issue an asset, it's kind of I'd say abstracted away from the base layer, right? You send instructions in Bitcoin transactions that counterparty interprets as to who holds what balance and who created what asset. Whereas with inscription, the inscription itself is on chain, and then the thing you're sending around is just a Satoshi. I think it adds a cool new way to look at Bitcoin. The more of this stuff, I don't see any reason why more of these things won't take off. Like what I had mentioned before, the EVM on Bitcoin, right? There's no reason to run that on ORD if you're not using the Satoshis. So maybe fork it and start a new app that you run, this new second layer that uses the same envelope, SegWit envelope that Ordinals does to store information. So just more awareness and more ways for artists to kind of make their mark on Bitcoin. So I think Ordinals just kind of continues that and shows how kind of Bitcoin is always there, as when we see all these other chains and stuff pop up, it kind of the focus eventually turns back to Bitcoin.
Mark, I know that you had built on Stacks. Do you want to comment here on sort of the evolution to Ordinals, or what it does differently or better?
Yeah, God, I could speak on this for hours, but it's just fundamentally very different. I remember when Ordinals first started making its way to the timeline and people were talking about it. I fundamentally believed that the concept of Ordinals wouldn't gather steam, and I was thinking of it in a different way, which is, hey, this is a cool way to replace IPFS. So that was initially my first thought, which is we've now got probably one of the most affordable decentralized data stores in the world that is going to be around a hell of a lot longer than we think, say, Dropbox, AWS, or some even IPFS is. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The kind of the paradigm of NFT growth and movement from 2021 to 22 was mostly gated around community utility, whether that's access to events or access to merchandise or further drops down the line, whatever that utility might look like. Mostly NFTs had their exponential growth because of utility. And Ordinals is really saying, actually, we have no support for any of that right now. And it's coming. You can assert on a Bitcoin signature being valid and somebody having ownership of an Ordinal, but it certainly doesn't exist in a true form right now. It isn't easily accessible to do things like that, and there's no concept of having a smart contract to do any innovation at the L1 layer. Whereas with Stacks, we have all of that, right? So we have this interactive mint where you could put other NFTs on top of other NFTs and they can burn, and it's really interactive and quite exciting. that won't exist on ordinals. And one of the benefits of that is we've seen an art renaissance on ordinals, which is great, because we kind of moved away from that. Early 2021, you know, when the Beeple 69 million sale happened, we just had this plethora of digital art just onboarding every chain, and it was really exciting for artists. And we moved away from that to collectibles. And we're kind of moving, I don't say fully back to this art paradigm, but it is nice to see that there is a chain where I think artists can truly thrive. And some of the most valuable inscriptions are those early inscriptions where an artist just threw something up there, which I think is beautiful in itself. It's just some really cool abstract digital art that someone's threw up there. It's got no utility, it's got no provenance that's relevant. It's just really cool. So that's my thoughts. It's challenging because there is no smart contract. So you can't do a lot of the stuff that your community is used to. And you just need to think outside the box.
Yeah, I think we've got time for a couple more questions here. Josie, I think you mentioned that, you know, there's still some tooling, some things that need to be worked out with ordinals. You know, I know it's been tricky to handle ordinals, mint ordinals, but we've got marketplaces coming online. Is the infrastructure maturing quickly? What have you seen on your end, Josie?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things with anything in the crypto ecosystem that we need to educate ourselves on and other people on as well, especially because most of the people dealing with these things are not technical. Like, we're talking about people trading over like spreadsheets and people trying to put something on an ordinal and it completely disappearing and going away and being burnt, right? Like, there's so many things going on here that are complex, not to mention a really big one that I'm curious about everyone's thoughts on here. I was chatting with, I'm excited about ordinals, first of all. And I think just to what Mark was saying, there's this really exciting time where we should look at what ordinals provides and think, you know, outside the box and how to innovate with that technology that's provided to us rather than copying and pasting what we may do on a different chain. But something that I'm really curious and a little bit worried about is the whole idea that Bitcoin wasn't made for this. And it's possible that Bitcoin developers could aggressively prune the data that people are storing on these ordinals and prune it off of Bitcoin. That's from, I'm not technical, so forgive me if I'm saying anything wrong there, but I've understood that it's stored as witness data in an area that is prunable. So it's something that I have concerns about, whether right now miners are making more money because things are inscribed. So it does give them those types of incentives to keep everything going. But if Bitcoin devs decide that this is not something they want on Bitcoin, it's an interesting factor at play. So I think we should create for ordinals as ordinals and not as other NFT things that we've done in the past. We should also be aware, and as creators, I think it's our responsibility that if something does happen with ordinals and it's not any longer supported and things get pruned, that as creators, we have the responsibility to put those things elsewhere and figure out a second route. So those are things that I'm thinking through as well.
Yeah, I think you made a good point. Like, it's up to the artists and the collectors, not just the artists, but to kind of store this data. I think the risk of losing SegWit data to like a lot of nodes pruning it is probably, I mean, unless they have a specific reason to, unless people start inscribing like things that might get you in trouble if you had it on your computer. And then now all of a sudden you've got a reason to prune that data. There's also kind of a response to ordinals with stamps. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it's basically using Counterparty to write data into UTXOs. So it's in a different kind of stored in a different spot in your node, and you can't prune that. You need those so that your node can validate double spend against double spends. So I think it comes down to asking people to store data, to store your data that maybe don't want to, and relying on that. I mean, that's the same problem that stuff that you don't pin on IPFS, right? And then someone's running a server and then it's gone and nobody's the potential for it to come back is there, but it's not there unless you kind of take the initiative and do it yourself. So yeah, I would say Ordinals does a little bit of the kind of game where it's it exists forever because it's on chain, where at the end of the day, I mean, we don't know what things are going to look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. So it's really on artists and collectors to kind of maintain anything that's not the token, anything that's associated with it. It's kind of their responsibility to archive it long term.
I think we are almost out of time. So one last question here. Just broadly, given the rise of ordinals, what excites each of you about the future of NFTs and cultural assets on Bitcoin? Just quick response from each of you.
I'd say I think it's here to stay. I think we're seeing more innovation, not less. So I don't think it's going away. No fear of everything disappearing tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm extremely excited to see this coming back up. Obviously, as Joe was saying in the beginning, Bitcoin is where all of this started. So to see people innovating and getting excited about art on Bitcoin is pretty exciting.
I think, blockchains sell block space, and there's finally a reason for degens to buy the Bitcoin block space. So let's keep it up.
All right, I think that'll do it for us. Joe, Josie, Mark, thank you so much for joining me today. This is great.
Thank you.
So much.